Let's be honest, the term biblical counseling can be a pretty loaded one. For some people, it's a source of real hope, but for others, it might bring up images of something rigid, simplistic, or maybe even harmful. Because it's so misunderstood, we're going to spend some time today unpacking a very specific, and I think you'll find a very different way of looking at it. So just take a second. When I say that phrase, biblical counseling, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it a pastor in a stuffy office? Maybe a specific book or method? Or is it a personal experience? Maybe a good one, maybe a not so good one. Whatever it is, just kind of hang on to that thought because your gut reaction is a really great place to start. According to our source material from Dr. Jeffrey Gross, most people's ideas land in one of two buckets. The first stereotype is that it's basically just secular therapy, but with a few Bible verses sprinkled on top like they're salt and pepper. The other stereotype is the total opposite, this really mechanical, almost robotic approach of just quoting scripture at a problem over and over, hoping it'll magically disappear. As we're about to see, both of these views really miss the heart of the matter. So, what if both of those are just caricatures? What if there is a third path? A way that isn't about finding the perfect formula or having the right verse for every situation, but is instead built on something much more fundamental. Simply being present with someone in their pain in a way that reflects Christ. And this right here brings us to the core idea we're exploring, this idea of reframing biblical counseling as embodied theology. Now, this isn't just slapping a new label on an old box. It's a completely different way of thinking about what's actually happening when one person sits with another who is hurting. Okay, so embodied theology sounds a lot academic, right? But stick with me. Here's what it means. It's when a counselor's beliefs, their theology, the stuff they believe deep down, don't just stay in their head as a list of facts. Instead, those beliefs get translated into how they actually show up in the room. It shapes their presence, the kinds of wise questions they ask, and how they help someone find their own place within God's bigger story. I love how Dr. Gross puts it here. Theology becomes the deep structure of the counselor. See, it's not about what you can recite from a book, it's about who you fundamentally are, especially when the pressure's on. That's the real test, isn't it? It's about your character, your patience, your humility, all of it being shaped by what you truly believe. And thinking this way helps guard us from two really common ways that care can go wrong. On one side, you have what the source calls performative counsel. You know the type. They can quote all the right verses, but there's no real steady love behind it. On the other side, you have improvisational counsel. This is the well-meaning friend who just wants to help, but doesn't have any real theological foundation, so their advice kind of blows in the wind. So you might be wondering, where does this idea even come from? Is it some new trendy thing? Well, actually no. It's built on a very old, very deep understanding of what it means to be human, a psychology of the heart. In fact, the roots of this whole approach go back over 100 years. A lot of the groundwork was laid in 1914 by Oswald Chambers in his book Biblical Psychology. So this isn't a new invention, it's a modern application of a very old idea. Now, get ready for this, because this quote from Chambers completely flips our modern thinking on its head. He says that in the Bible's view, the heart is the real center of thinking. The brain? The brain is just the machinery, the hardware, that the heart uses to get its ideas out. Basically, the heart is the CEO and the brain is the operations department. It's a radical idea. So if the heart is the command center, what does it actually do? Well, pretty much everything. It's the seat of our perception. It's how we see the world. It's the real hard drive for our memories. It's the source of our deepest disposition, the wellspring of our choices, and, maybe most importantly, it's the place where we decide what truly matters, what has real value. And it all boils down to this really simple truth. You can't properly care for someone if you have a flawed map of what a person is. If the heart is the true control center, then any real, lasting care has to start there, period. Okay, so that's the big idea, the why behind it all. But let's get practical. What does this actually look like in practice? How does a counselor actually live out this idea of embodied theology? Well, the ultimate model is the incarnation itself. Think about it. When God wanted to solve humanity's deepest problems, he didn't shout advice from heaven. He came near. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He moved into the neighborhood. So the first and most important part of the counselor's posture has to be nearness.
This chart just nails the balance required. Up here in the top left, when you have both a real relationship and truth, you get integrated, healthy care. That's the goal. But look what happens if you take one away. Relationship without truth? It just becomes sentimentality, feel-good fluff. And truth without relationship? Well, that just feels like an accusation. It's a weapon. You absolutely need both.
And this leads to such a powerful distinction. Christ isn't just the content of our hope, the what we talk about. He is also the method of our care, the how we go about it. His life isn't just the message, it's the model.
So, what was his method? Well, he rarely just handed out simple answers. Instead, he asked these brilliant, probing questions that got to the root of what was going on in people's hearts. He helped them see what they really wanted. And only then, after all that, did he invite them to turn and trust. It's an approach that creates ownership, not just blind compliance. So let's land the plane here and look at how a specific group, Restoring Hope Ministries, or RHM, takes all these big principles and puts them into practice, with real, concrete safeguards to make sure the care they provide is safe. A huge piece of the puzzle is how they view Scripture. On the one hand, you can see it as a book of ammunition, a collection of proof texts you can fire at problems. But the RHM model sees Scripture as a story world, this massive, beautiful, true story that you're invited to step into and find your own part to play. It's about belonging, not just being corrected. This leads to 3 key distinctives that really act as guardrails. First, a disciplined focus on relational attunement, which is really just a way of saying they practice deep, active listening. Second, as we just saw, they use Scripture faithfully in its context. And third, and this is so important, they have a structured system of supervision. No counselor is a lone wolf operating in isolation. And why all these structures? Well, it's to make sure that the care provided goes beyond just having good intentions. They're designed from the ground up to create an environment that's genuinely safe for the person seeking help, while at the same time keeping the counselor humble and accountable. So we'll end with this question, which really gets to the very heart of this whole approach. What if the most powerful thing for our healing isn't always about getting the right piece of advice, but is about experiencing the right kind of presence? What if what we need most is someone willing to just be near? Something to think about.